These are all big series, and being a completionist, I will want to read them all and read them all to completion. Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to Bask in the Story. So I've been reading John Gwynne's Faithful and the Fallen. I'm on book 2, this is book 1, and it's a 4-book series, epic fantasy. It's superb, it's really, really good. But it's made me think, I want to read more series, and though this is 4 books and 2,500 pages, I'm going to give you a list of 10 massive, chunky series that I want to read. Now, these are all quite intimidatingly large. We've got plenty of fantasy. We've got some sci-fi, we've got some historical fiction. I think the smallest series is maybe 7 books and sort of 5,000 pages. So twice as long as this series. And the longest is double, if not triple that. So there are some monster series in this that I want to discuss. We're going to go in some sort of order. We're going to go from probably what I'd class as the least intimidating to the most intimidating. And this is just pure judgment. I have not read any of these books yet. Obviously, they're brand new series to me. But I expect a lot of you have read some of these, if not maybe the majority of these. But I think 1 or 2 probably haven't read all of them. There are quite a few BookTube favourites in there, and there's some, probably 1 or 2 that probably aren't mentioned as much in BookTube as well, but we'll make a start. So probably the least intimidating to start with is probably one of the most talked about authors on BookTube, and that's Brandon Sanderson. I can't even say his name. Brandon Sanderson. This is Mistborn, but it's all part of the Cosmere series, and the Cosmere series is huge and ever growing, and it's basically a world that's created by Sanderson that incorporates quite a few of his stories. So there's the Mistborn series, there's the Way of Kings series, which name escapes me at the moment. There's various standalones. There seems to be an ever-increasing number of standalones coming out from him. We've had the various secret projects. I think there's 3 have come out so far. There's 1 more still outstanding coming out. So this is an ever-growing, and a lot of them are Cosmere, ever-growing, vast array of works. I think in the main Cosmere series there's maybe 14, 15 books now. As I say, it's continuously growing. Now, what Sanderson is known for is his magic systems and his plots. As well as his characters, don't get me wrong, but his ability to write magic systems is probably very famous. It's well renowned. It's discussed a lot on BookTube, and I'm curious to see what he does. He's also very good at linking plots and bringing stories together. I think there's a phrase called the Sunderlunch, is it? Which I look forward to experiencing. But there's a huge amount of praise lavished on his books and his series in general. The reason it's probably the least intimidating because I've heard that his writing style is fairly easy to get into and get reading. It's not immensely florid or lyrical, but it's engaging and quick-paced and, a page-turning read. So I'm excited to get this started at some point. As I say, I've got the first book in the Final series. The thing that also holds me back slightly from starting this immediately is I think he's announced that the UK is going to get a load of different covers potentially in the near future. So maybe I hold off on this because I've only got this one so far. I do like the white covers, I must admit, but if they're going to change them dramatically, maybe I hold off on the Brandon Sanderson series and wait for something else. So that's the first one. The second series is Joe Abercrombie's. Why am I struggling with all the names of authors at the moment? Joe Abercrombie's First Law Expanded World series. So I think there's 10 main books now in this series. There's 2 sets of trilogies, and I think 4 standalone novels, which equate to roughly 5,000 pages. So again, quite a chunky a lot of work to get through. As I say, this is not too intimidating because even though there's 10 books, it's the first, or the way most people talk about the first thing is the original First Law trilogy, which is just the 3 books. So if I read those first 3, if I enjoy them, then obviously I can expand to the much larger series. But if I don't enjoy them, then I could probably cut off there because it's a completed trilogy rather than having to get into the standalones and the other trilogy that he's written. So this is known as sort of grimdark, which is a term that's thrown about a lot, but what does it really mean? We'll find out. I know the original, I believe the original phrasing from grimdark comes from 40k, the tabletop battle game, which also has a huge amount of fiction, which I have read. So we'll see if it's in line with that or whether it's something entirely different. So I think with the grimdark theory, there's a lot of morally grey characters, which seems very popular. There's a lot of there's a lot of discussion I've seen that there's not a huge amount of plot, but it's very character focused. So I'm not quite sure what that means. I assume there's a plot of some sort, but maybe it's much more slower paced and it's about building the characters and building your connection with the characters. So that'll be interesting to find out and read, and we'll see how I feel about that, because I do like a quick plot. I do like action. I do like it when it progresses, but then I do like to get to know a character. I do like to feel emotionally engaged with my characters as I'm reading. I say my characters, with the characters I'm reading. So, which actually leads me on to the next one, quite nicely, talking about character development and slow-paced work. And the third one, the third least intimidating series that I want to read is Robin Hobb's Realm of the Eldlings. Now, this is quite a big series. There are, I think, 16 books now in the Robin Hobb Realm of the Eldlings universe, and that comes to about 11,000 pages. Now, they're mainly split up into quite a few trilogies. So there's one regarding, I think there's two regarding Fitz, who's like one of our main characters in the Realm of the Eldlings, and you sort of follow his journey and his character development throughout it, which sounds interesting. And then there's another trilogy which is sort of, I think, separate but set in the same world, which is about a live ship trilogy. It's about magic ships that are in some way alive, which sounds curious. I'm interested in seeing that. But so it's a big series. It's got several storylines. There is a reading guide, which makes it quite straightforward, and you start off with an initial trilogy, and so that's not too daunting to read a trilogy. But obviously, if I expand to the full 16 books, that is quite intimidating. And it's also, I'm interested to see how, when people say it's slow-paced and very character-focused, how slow-paced and character-focused it actually is, because I prefer faster-paced book, honestly. So it'd be interesting to see how I feel about a slower-paced fantasy story. But everyone praises Robin Hobb's writing style, and ability with the written word is very highly regarded. So we will see what that brings. So the fourth least intimidating series is going to be The Saxon Tales by Bernard Cornwell. So this is historical fiction. There's actually 14 books in the series, but it's only, I think, 4,500 pages. So the books are all fairly shortish, as these books go, maybe around sort of 300 pages. But this is about sort of 9th, 10th century AD. It's about Saxon England and the Viking invasions and the battles that ensued, and Alfred, the Saxon king, fending off the Danish Vikings. It sounds really interesting. I like historical fiction. I've read Bernard Cornwell before, mainly his Sharp novels. I've read quite a few of them, so his ability to write battles and action and fighting is really, really good and engaging, and you feel like I've certainly felt within the Sharp novels that you're there in that environment. So it'd be interesting to see that in a series like this, which is set, hundreds of years before Napoleon's time, which when Sharp is set, and feel that story. But he always, though it's obviously fiction, he takes a lot from actual historical events and does a lot of research into his books to give that historical accuracy with a fictional spin to actually tell a story within that environment. So that should be really fascinating. So that's The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. The next one I've got is WIght's The Cradle. Now this is actually a completed series. I think there's 12 books now in the series, and it's about 5,000-ish pages. So it's only just completed this summer with the last book, and I don't know a huge amount about the plot of this one, but everyone raves about it who's read it. If you look on Goodreads, I think most of his books have got like 20,000 reviews, and a lot of those books are over 4.5 stars, which is huge. And virtually, I think all of them are over 4 stars, but certainly a number of them are still over 4.5 stars with 20,000 reviews. So The people who've read it seem to really enjoy it and absolutely love it. I've heard that it's got sort of, it's almost like the written word of, and it's been sort of compared to like anime and manga, but in prose rather than graphics. So that sounds fascinating. I don't know a huge amount of the plot, but I'm very curious about exploring this one because it sounds quite different from the other series I've heard. So we will see. But that's one that sort of sits in the middle because I don't know enough about it to see whether it's going to be intimidating or not intimidating. But I'm curious to see what that storyline is and why everyone loves it so much. The next one on my list is actually the first sci-fi series on this list, and that is The Expanse by S.A. Corey. This is actually a writing duo, so there's two authors who write under the pseudonym. So it's set in the future, and humanity is spread amongst the solar system, and we have effectively sort of different political groups of people who live in various places. So you've got like, I think you've got people still on Earth, you've got belters who live in the asteroid belt, and then you've got people who live on other planets. I'm not sure which planet, but I'm sure I'll find out once I start reading it. And it's about that competition and compliance and working together between these three and the various divides and the more prosperous areas and the less prosperous areas, as well as, you know, all entailed in space travel and events, and as well as political intrigue. I believe there's some action and adventure within that, and I think one of the main things we follow is a crew of a ship called the Rocinante throughout this, and they sort of are our linking storyline in this world and their experience and that. And I think it starts off with there's been a spaceship has exploded, been wrecked, and there's suspicions around it and who's done it and why has it been done, etc., and who's to blame. You know, and there's a lot of tension between these different groups of humanity, which sounds very interesting. And I haven't read any long series of sci-fi really. I've read some shorter series, but most of the series I've read, i.e. The Foundation by Isaac Asimov and Remembrance of Earth's Past by Cixin Liu, have been very idea focused. And I really fancy the idea of reading a sci-fi series that is more character focused, which I'm hoping this is. But I don't know, so we will find out when I get round to that one as well. But as I say, that's 9 books and about 5,000 pages. The next one on the list is another author I've never read, but I've heard good things about, and this is a historical fiction work by C.J. Sanderson, and it's the Shard Lake series. So this is, I've actually got a copy of this one. Actually, I've got 2 books in this one. So this is the first one in the series, Dissolution, and then I've got the last one of the series as well, which is Tombland, which can you see is a bit of a beast. The first one doesn't look too bad. Why have I got the first and last and none of the middle ones? Because I found them both at a charity shop and they didn't have the middle ones, they only had the first and last, so I picked them up. That's simple as that. So this is set in the 1500s. It's set around Henry VIII. Matthew Shardlake is a lawyer who is employed by Henry VIII, I believe. He works for Thomas Cromwell, I believe. So he works for Thomas Cromwell doing investigations. Thomas Cromwell works for Henry VIII. My concern is, obviously, the books get bigger and bigger as you go along. This one doesn't look too bad. I've not read the author before. I know Carlos from StoryTube really enjoys the series and recommends it highly. So that gives me some hope that I'll enjoy it. But it's something I've not read. It sounds fascinating to have a lawyer investigating sort of crimes and other things with the ongoing events of the 1500s with, you know, Henry VIII and all the politics and religious upheaval that happened at that time, and having a picture within that does sound really interesting and quite fascinating and engaging. But again, I have no idea how I got on with the writing style. And if I didn't say, that's 7 books in total and 4,500 pages. Third book, third most intimidating, is actually one, again, I've never read the author, but this is a series that I've always seen the author's works in the sci-fi section, and I've never picked him up, and that's Iain M Banks and his Culture series. So in that series there's 10 books, and again about 4,500 pages. So again, you know, the books aren't huge generally, 400 or 500 pages, but it's regarding a future event where we've got humanity and I believe other races, and we have super artificial intelligence basically running society and running this sort of, I can't tell if it's a utopian or dystopian utopian. I'm not sure. I need to read that. I don't know a huge amount of it. I understand that the first book, consider Phoebus, this one, is supposedly the weakest in the series, or certainly one of the weakest in the series, and not great. So I think some people do say starting with the second one that was published, which I forget the name of, but I'll show up here. So that doesn't bode well when the first book is not very highly regarded, but that engaged me enough to do it. And I am sort of one of those people who likes to read things in an order. I'm also a completionist, which is why these concern me when I get into massive great series, because I want to read them all to the completion. And if I don't enjoy it, then I got to learn to not force myself to read books I don't enjoy. But DNFing is not easy for everybody. We try to get better at it if we're not enjoying it, but for some reason I have this obsession with trying to complete. Anyway, it's a different story. So that's culture. Again, sounds really interesting. So that leaves me with the final two, and the final two are well-known series. In second place, I'm putting Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, who picked up the last few books after Robert Jordan passed away. This is, again, a 14-book series, 12,000 pages. It's a bit of a beast. It's really well known. It's very popular. There's obviously the TV series that now started, is in season 2, is it now? I don't know, I've not been watching it, but anyway. So it is a massive series. It's big. It's one of those archetypal fantasy series that it feels like everyone should read. The reason I haven't is, one, it's enormous. Two is most people talk about the slog with Wheel of Time. They talk about the middle books being really difficult to get through, and a lot of people seem to lose their way in that element. And it's a concern in a 14-book series when people are telling you that books 7 to 10 or 6 to 10 or whatever it is, 6 to 9, are a slog and are difficult. It doesn't bode hugely well to you wanting to complete the series, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people really enjoy the series, and they enjoy the way the storyline develops. And it's sort of there's quite a few tropes within it that we'd recognise as tropes now, probably. You've got the farm boy to hero trope, along with others. So it should be interesting. I've heard concerns over sort of Robert Jordan's writing and how he describes people and how he always describes them the same whenever they appear in the story. I don't know how true that is because I've not read the books yet, but hopefully I'll find out at some point. So that's number 2. And number 1, the most intimidating book series that I actually want to read, but I am concerned about starting, is Malazan, or Malazan, or however else you pronounce it. Everyone seems to pronounce it differently. And I think even Stephen Erickson pronounces it differently. He doesn't really care how you pronounce it. But anyway, this series, which has 10 main books by Stephen Erickson himself, which come to about, oh goodness, what did I work out? About 10,000 pages. There's also another set of books by another author within that world. Is it Iain M I think his name is. I think there's another 6 books by him. It's enormous. But if we just take the 10 main books by Stephen Erickson, what I do here is Stephen Erickson is an exceptional writer. That's the main drive I get. He's incredible at writing characters. He's incredible at writing plots. He's a bit of a genius in that sense. That's the impression I get of his writing, which is very exciting. This is fancy stories. Who did I watch a video of? Kronk the book guy did a very good overview of the books. And one of the things you got to realise is it's set in a world, and the books jump around all over the world, and we sort of jump backwards and forwards between storylines. And it's about the political intrigues of the state of Malazan as it tries to take over this world, and the fallout of that, and the people involved within that. And it sounds fascinating. The concerns I have, as even though Stephen Erickson is obviously, or comes across, or is talked about as an exceptional writer, the storyline and what people do say is he doesn't give you all the information. So it's a case of you will not understand everything as you start reading through these books. And that is always, I don't mind that so much, I don't think. we'll find out how much it bugs me when we're reading them. But I don't mind that too much, is as you discover things as you read along. I don't need to know everything straight away. I don't mind discovering things as we read along. And also, a lot of people have said that actually it's better on the reread. Now that concerns me, because that means it's then 20 books and 20,000 pages rather than the 10 books, if you've got to read it twice to really understand it. Now, if I really thoroughly love it and want to reread it, that means it's an awesome series, and a lot of people obviously think it is because they do reread it and they absolutely adore it. So that bodes well, but again, I've also seen other people who have really struggled with this because they've not been able to get into it. As I say, it does jump around as well, but having watched Kronk the Book Guy's guide, I think that's given me an idea of what happens. That limits that fear a little bit. And also I know we've got, I've been watching Colin on Colin's Corner and Usman from Bars and Books, who are both starting their journey on the Malazan, and they've read the first, I think they're on the second one now, and they're thoroughly enjoying it. So that bodes well, because I know I have similar tastes to some of the stuff they enjoy. So that's all positive, but it is an intimidating series to read, and I want to read it. I'm just a bit intimidated. The other thing that excites me about that is I believe Broken Binding are going to do a book series of it and publish it with their magic touch starting in 2024. So that's really exciting as well. So that gives me another impetus to really want to start this. But as I say, these are all big series, and being a completionist, I will want to read them all and read them all to completion, which means I can't start them all. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are. Which ones should I start with? Which ones would you suggest starting with? I'm probably looking at starting next year with these, because this year I'm finishing up Faithful and Fallen and hoping to read the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu. So that's going to be my reading for probably the main bulk of the series I read this year. But what should I start reading in 2024? Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read these series. Which ones do you really enjoy? Which ones do you recommend? Which ones do you want me to avoid? Which ones do you think I'll hate? If there are any. I think I'll probably enjoy them all. I hope I do. I'm excited to delve into all of these. And it may be the case, actually, maybe I'll pick up a trilogy here from like the early ones, like Brandon Sanderson or Robin Hobb or John Abercrombie, and do a trilogy from each and see. And then maybe try and do, Malazan or Wheel of Time, or maybe do a sci-fi or historical fiction one to balance off the fantasy. I don't know, there's so many options. This is the joy of book reading, isn't it? There's so many books to read. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'm babbling. It's been great talking to you. I'm very excited about all these series. I'm not going to be able to read them all at the same time, which is unfortunate. It's just, it would take me, even if I read them, and they were the only books I read, it would probably take me 3 years, 4 years to read them all. Anyway, beside the point. Thank you for watching. If you got this far, please do leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. The fourth most, I keep saying most, and that is The Expanse. I can't speak. And that is The Expanse. The Expanse.